Finance Minister Nicola Willis has raised the prospect of partially privatising Kiwibank. But would more capital for Kiwibank mean more disruption in our banking sector? Katie Bradford sat down with Kiwibank CEO Steve Jurkovic.
That original founding vision that Jim Anderton and others had, which is, hey, New Zealand would be better off if it had its own bank, is actually really persevered for a quarter of a century, because the market shape is pretty much the same, very dominated by Australian-owned companies. So, like the real steel thread of why it's around is really, authentic and true to its purpose, which I think is really important. Look, we've grown really fast. We've had 5 years of consistent performance, but there's so much opportunity ahead of us. So, look, in transformation, I would say, we're in the middle, probably another couple of 2-3 years, and we should be in, at a future state that gives us a real opportunity to grow even faster. What I'd also say is all 4 of the big banks are also facing similar challenges, and so what we're trying to do is get to the future first, which is a modern cloud-based digital technology, much the same way as TVNZ and others are.
Official Information Act documents I have show that Treasury says the overall market doesn't actually look that different today than it did 13 years ago. Why has Kiwibank been unable to grow, to make a difference? Is it structure? Is it a lack of capital? What is it?
Yeah, it's interesting, the way I sort of look at it is that no bank in 25 years has ever made any ground like we have. But then when I look to the bigger competitors, we're a quarter of their size. So I take that point, there's still a lot of room. This year we did sort of 15-17% of refinances. So in that sense, I'd say we're making good progress. But ultimately, I think that's what the ComCom report is about, is that it still does look like pretty cosy 4 big players. Why is profit bigger in New Zealand than it is in Australia? All those sort of points. So, while I think we've made really good progress and I think we've had an impact, I really feel like there's just so much more we can do.
Yeah, and the latest figures I've seen, you've got about 20% of new home lending.
Yep, that's right.
Which is pretty good, right?
Yeah,
but you still only have a market share of 7.6%.
Yep.
How do you bridge that gap? How do you bring your market share up to that 20%?
Yeah.
And is that, what would the target be? What would you like it to be?
Well, I think we can be double what we are now. What we've done is we were very focused on, people coming to see Kiwibank or a mobile mortgage manager. What we've done is grow in the advisor market. So in New Zealand, about 60% of loans now are facilitated by a broker. If I think about 6 years ago when we were doing it, it was about 40%. So Australia is about 75%. So that trend's a really massive one. So what we've tried to decide is, okay, so we want to be where customers are deciding. And if you want to decide with a broker, we want to be there. Whereas historically, we've sort of tried to win on our own. So we've partnered a lot more. So we've had 1,000 more brokers in the last couple of years. So I think we've got, 2-3 years of really good growth through that advisor market where we've only just started. And if you think about how a relationship works, we get together, we make a business relationship, we start to do a few deals, and then you get more confident that I can deliver for you. And so you provide us with a lot more opportunity. So I think we've got a really big opportunity. The flip side, I'd say, is the broker market's a little bit disaffected by the big banks because they kind of are in sometimes and they're out other times. Whereas given we're the 5th biggest, we know we have to partner, and that's what I've tried to get across to brokers, which is, hey, we want to grow with you, not instead of you.
But you've got your own brokers, right?
Yep.
Doesn't that limit you through just having New Zealand home loans? Wouldn't it be better to be out there in the market? If I go to a broker tomorrow that I find on Google, they don't necessarily allow me to go to Kiwibank.
Yeah, so you've hit the nail on the head actually, because that was the exact position. So New Zealand home loans up until 2.5 years ago were mainly our sole focus. What we've done is said, look, we treasure you as a sister company, but we're also going to grow our reach into the market. And that's when I talk about the 1,000 brokers. Those are not associated with New Zealand home loans. They are the market. We're still not in front of everyone, but that gives us about 80% coverage of the volume in the market. So there's a much better chance that when you go and see someone now, we'll be on the shopping list. But your point about the challenge is exactly right.
So you need to grow that.
Yeah, we do, 100%. Particularly in business banking, it's much more done through business banker to customer, as you'll appreciate. But in that mortgage broker market, I just think it's inarguable that's what's going to happen.
The competition is obviously the big issue. The Commerce Commission and the government have used terms like maverick and disruptor.
Yeah.
What do you think of those terms? How do you become that person? Steve Jurkovic, the maverick.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit over getting photos of Top Gun, but like when you think about it, that idea of the disruptor, that really is what we were started for. And that's what I think actually was the great gift that I probably didn't appreciate when I started in the role, which is, you can make up a slogan and you can think about a campaign and do all these things, but actually the main idea was you need to get out there and grow and change things. And so on the one hand, we're proud of our progress, but there's so much more we can do. So I think we're the right group for that. I think having stable pathway for capital is really important, because the worst thing a bank does is sort of get excited and grow and then has to turn the tap off. So we've always made a plan that, whatever growth plan we're on, we can handle by ourselves, because I never want us to be in a position where we have to turn off the tap, so to speak. So having access to that consistent capital will allow us to, set a plan that's more ambitious than it is now. Because at the moment we need to balance our transformation spend, running our business, and then growing, which requires more capital. So that's a balancing act. Obviously, if you had more access to capital, then you could open up and do more in business banking, larger businesses particularly, and keep going in home loans.
That capital is key. Do you have a preference for where you want it to come from? The Minister's clearly outlined the options. Have you been talking, and I know it's not your decision, but have you been looking at it and thinking about it, and what do you want to see?
Yeah, I'm super encouraged by the fact that all options are open. I just think you want consistency of opinion and view around that. It would be difficult if you got an investment and that they suddenly turn up and say, we want you to do X or Y or Z and try and dominate your strategy, rather than being aligned to your strategy and being consistent. So, yeah, I don't think it matters, but I think in the first stages, just having a consistency of approach.
And $500 million is the target? That's what you need, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that's the optimum amount. I mean, 250, 225 has done really well for us, but 500 would give us 5 clear years of, really growing fast, and that takes you through the period where the capital requirements are set in stone. So all things being equal, that sort of $500 million is probably fantastic. 250 is still really good, but actually probably that's the number we would look for.
And how do you keep Kiwibank in Kiwi hands, and is that important to you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think having New Zealand's bank owned by New Zealand and working for New Zealand is critical to the offering. Like, you still need to be a good bank, you still need to offer everything you need to do, people need to trust you, and you need to do all that things, but whether that needs to be 100% ownership, some people have a very firm view. I've already had probably 100 emails where people say you shouldn't sell any at all. And then there's a lot of people overwhelmingly say, well, as long as it's controlled and working in New Zealand's interest, why do you need 100%? And I think that's the argument, like with the power companies in Air New Zealand, right? It's owned by New Zealand, but it doesn't have to be 100% owned by New Zealand.
And in terms of that competition, how hard is it for you as the fifth bank, as that's the medium-sized bank, as the Commerce Commission puts it?
Yeah.
And in what ways do the big banks shut you out and make it hard for you?
The advantage that the big banks get from the capital requirements, in the sense that they need to hold less capital than we do. And to this day, I remain really confused why, if someone lends me money, they have to hold more capital if they borrow from Kiwibank or someone else. And those sorts of things are a headwind for us. We've done pretty well, but I think you could pretty easily, and the rules are in progress to try and even that.
So that's the Reserve Bank though, right? Is that a plea to the Reserve Bank to say, hey, give us a break, let us be more competitive?
Well, I mean, that's been the long-standing argument, I think. And there is an argument to say, well, you're bigger and you're more sophisticated, but we've all had our issues with the way that we work with those things. So I don't think there's a good reason why, you as a borrower, I should hold more capital than ASB or ANZ. I don't think that makes sense to me. So there's some rules like that. I think there's arguments around proportionality, like what's required for banks of which size. If I think about smaller domestic banks compared to us, they would look at us and say, geez, you've got so much more resource than us, it's so much more affordable. And we look at the bigger ones and say, hey, you get a hand from Australia. But also they get, they have to act in the best interest of their Australian owners. So they get some headwinds from that as well.
How important as Kiwibank, as Kiwis Bank, is it to have that aspect of the public good in it? You've closed branches in places like Monganui and Waihi, those really impact those small communities and surely means you lose customers. What is your social responsibility there? Yeah,
I mean, that's a great question. So if I use Waihi as an example, which is really close to my heart, because I'm from Paeroa, my uncle and auntie live in Waihi, and my uncle, who passed recently, was the postmaster in Waihi, so it's actually really close to the bone. The facts were that in Waihi, 4 customers had come in the last 2 months. So the perception of retreating from regional New Zealand or wherever you are and branches closing is really real. People feel like they're getting left behind. They feel like the infrastructure that should be there for them, is being taken away. So that's very emotive. The practical customer element of it is actually very low in terms of the people that come there. But that doesn't mean, and I've seen recent examples, when I've been on the West Coast and stuff, a mum and her son coming in with some particular requirements, having the branch and being able to go in there and talk to someone and have empathy for their situation is really important. So it is a big balancing act. I think in some ways the bank closing is sort of seen as a symbol of that you're getting left behind rather than the banking needs, and I think that's real, and we do have a responsibility. That's shown by the fact that, you know, we're quarter of the size and got double the points of location as the biggest bank.
And we've already recently seen that the partially privatised energy companies in particular maximising profits, which some would say comes at the expense of their consumers, is in keeping with their requirements to their shareholders, right? Will Kiwibank be obligated in that same way, and what problems could that create?
Look, I haven't seen, you know, what the letter of intention would be for that sort of situation, so it's hard to predict the future. But every letter of intention I've had in the 6 years I've had in there has been very balanced about serve the long-term interests of what the strategy is. And our view is by taking not trying to take every dollar off the table, it gives us the best chance to be sustainably successful. And I sort of bore our team with this idea of being a 5-year overnight success, which is you don't have to try and maximise in the short term, that there's way more value for New Zealand by taking a longer term view. And so I don't think that's going to be what the requirements are. I think you have to make sure that you get across that the core benefit of Kiwibank is that it doesn't have to take every dollar off the table. It doesn't have to squeeze every profit dollar in the short term. That having a much more impactful bank over the next 10 years is way more important.
So anyone who might want to buy some shares in Kiwibank may have to be willing to accept they might not make as big profits as they might elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone that invests in a company needs to buy into its strategy. I think who we are and what we're about and our purpose of Kiwi making Kiwi better off makes us different. I think performance and purpose help each other. They're not in a trade-off. So I think, like many companies, you might look at that and say, okay, this is a long-term value play. Or you might look for something that's, looks like it's going to pay more dividends. You make all those choices. But look, as long as I'm around and we have the sort of, philosophy we've got now is let's stick to what we know and let's take a long-term view. And that's actually what people want from a bank and what they want from an investment.